Commander Vex Krall stretched his forearms in what could only be described as supreme satisfaction, each limb ending in razor-sharp talons that had never known the indignity of actual combat. Why would they? The Zar'keth Empire had conquered 47 star systems without breaking a sweat, well, without breaking whatever passed for sweat in their silicon-based physiology. Status report: Sub-Commander Nix. Vex commanded from his elevated platform aboard the flagship Doombringer. Yes, they actually named their ships things like that. Subtle wasn't exactly in the Zar'keth vocabulary. Sir, the invasion fleet maintains perfect formation, Nix replied, her voice carrying that particular tone of boredom that comes from knowing you are about to squash something pathetically weak. 200 warships, each armed with quantum disruptors, plasma cannons, and enough firepower to glass a continent. Our target approaches in 3 standard time units. Vex's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. 3 standard time units. Barely enough time to properly warm up the weapon systems, let alone face any real resistance. This was going to be almost insulting in its simplicity. And remind me again, Vex said, his tone dripping with the kind of sarcasm that could corrode hull plating, what exactly makes this little blue rock worth our attention? The planet designated Earth possesses abundant natural resources, sir. Water, rare minerals, and a breathable atmosphere perfect for our colonial expansion. Nix paused, consulting her datapad with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. Oh, and approximately 8 billion indigenous life forms that call themselves humans. The bridge erupted in what could generously be called laughter, though it sounded more like metal grinding against stone. 8 billion. As if numbers meant anything when those numbers represented creatures who still used chemical propulsion to barely escape their own gravity well. Humans, Vex repeated, savoring the word like it was some exotic delicacy. Let me see if I understand this correctly. These humans have been aware of our existence for exactly 0 time units, possess technology that would have been considered primitive 3,000 years ago, and their most advanced weapons still rely on. What was it again? Kinetic projectiles, sir, Nix answered, barely containing her own amusement. They fire small metal objects very fast and hope they hit something important. Small metal objects, Vex mused, his eyes glowing with genuine delight. How wonderfully quaint. Here we are, capable of manipulating matter at the quantum level, bending space-time to our will and commanding energy weapons that can punch holes through moon-sized asteroids. And they throw rocks. Very sophisticated rocks, granted, but rocks nonetheless. The tactical display shimmered to life, showing the approaching blue-green planet in all its unsuspecting glory. Earth hung there like a ripe fruit waiting to be plucked, completely unaware that its entire existence was about to change forever. Or end forever. Vex hadn't quite decided which would be more entertaining. Intelligence reports indicate they have something called nuclear weapons, Nix continued, scrolling through data that would have made any human military analyst weep with envy. Primitive fusion and fission devices that they seem quite proud of. Nuclear weapons, Vex repeated, his voice taking on the tone one might use when discussing a child's crayon drawing. How adorable. They have discovered how to split atoms. What's next? Are they going to impress us with their mastery of fire? The bridge crew's laughter intensified. After all, when your shields could absorb the energy output of a small star, the idea of being threatened by nuclear weapons was about as terrifying as being attacked by particularly aggressive butterflies. Sir, called out Navigator Zix from his position near the tactical display. Preliminary scans show their defensive capabilities are, well, they appear to have none worth mentioning. Some orbital satellites, a few space stations that look like they were assembled by enthusiastic amateurs. And what appears to be, sir, are those chemical rockets. They are indeed chemical rockets, Navigator Vex confirmed, his mood improving by the second. Apparently, these humans believe that controlled explosions are the pinnacle of space travel technology. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Here was a species that had barely figured out how to leave their own atmosphere, and yet they'd somehow managed to spread across their entire planet. It was almost Inspiring, in the way that watching an insect struggle might be inspiring to someone with too much time and a twisted sense of humor. "Orders, sir?" Nix asked, though they all knew what came next. "Standard conquest protocol," Vex replied, settling back into his command throne with the satisfaction of someone about to solve a puzzle designed for children. Disable their communications, eliminate any military resistance, and prepare for planetary occupation. I suspect this will all be over before our weapons finish charging. As the Doombringer led its fleet toward the unsuspecting blue world, none of them could have imagined they were about to encounter something far more dangerous than any weapon humanity had ever conceived. They were about to meet human will. The first shots fired in what would later be remembered as the most educational war in galactic history came exactly as Commander Vex Kral had predicted, pathetically. "Sir, we are detecting incoming projectiles from the surface," reported weapons specialist QX, his voice carrying all the excitement of someone announcing the weather. "Appears to be... Wait. Let me confirm this. Yes, sir. They are firing metal slugs at us." Vex's mandibles clicked in pure delight. Metal slugs. Against quantum reactive shields that could stop a supernova. How absolutely precious. "Are they at least large metal slugs?" "Negative, sir. Roughly 20 to 30 millimeters in diameter, traveling at approximately, oh my, sir, they are moving at barely 3,000 meters per second. The bridge fell silent for a moment, not from fear, but from the sheer absurdity of the situation. It was like being pelted with gravel by an angry toddler. 3,000 meters per second, Vex repeated slowly, savoring each word. "Our personal defense barriers move faster than their weapons. Should we even bother raising shields?" "Protocol suggests we should, sir," Nix interjected, though her tone suggested she found the whole thing rather silly. "You know, just in case they have somehow developed ammunition that defies the laws of physics." "Raise shields," Vex commanded with a theatrical sigh. "We wouldn't want to hurt their feelings by completely ignoring their valiant effort." The moment the human projectiles made contact with the Zar'keth shields, the cosmic joke reached its punchline. The metal slugs simply stopped. Not deflected, not absorbed with dramatic energy discharges, just stopped, as if they'd hit an invisible wall made of crystallized disappointment. "Damage report," Vex called out, though everyone knew the answer. "0 damage, sir. The projectiles didn't even cause shield fluctuation. Our defensive systems barely registered the impact." "Excellent," Vex declared, rising from his command throne. "It begin return fire. Let's show these humans what actual weapons look like." The Doombringer's main plasma batteries powered up with a sound like thunder having an argument with lightning. When they fired, the night sky above Earth lit up like a festival of destruction. Entire human military installations simply ceased to exist, vaporized so completely that their atoms forgot they'd ever been part of something larger. Direct hits on 7 military installations, reported Tactical Officer Rix. Complete annihilation. "No survivors detected." "And their response?" Vex asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "More metal slugs, sir. Slightly faster this time, they have managed to reach 3,200 meters per second." The aliens' amusement reached new heights. It was like watching someone try to fight a forest fire with a water pistol, except less effective and infinitely more entertaining. "Sir," interrupted Communications Officer Teeks, "we are receiving multiple transmissions from the surface. They appear to be surrender negotiations." "Already?" Vex asked, genuinely disappointed. "But we have barely started." "Very well, let's hear what these humans have to say for themselves." The main screen flickered to life, revealing what appeared to be a human military commander. The creature looked remarkably fragile, with its soft skin, limited appendages, and those peculiar optical sensors that could apparently only see in a narrow spectrum of light. "I am General Marcus Webb of the United Earth Defense Force," the human announced, his voice carrying an odd quality that Vex couldn't quite identify. We request terms for surrender." Vex leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. "Terms? You fired primitive projectiles at starships that could crack your moon in half, and now you want to negotiate terms? How delightfully optimistic." "We know we can't win," the human continued, and there was something in his voice, something that didn't quite match the words. "But we ask that you spare civilian populations." "Of course we will spare them," Vex replied magnanimously. "Dead workers are useless workers. You will all make excellent laborers once we have adjusted your social structure." The human's face did something strange, an expression that Vex's translation systems couldn't quite parse. "Thank you for your mercy." The transmission ended, and Vex turned to his crew with satisfaction. "Well, that was easier than expected. Begin landing operations. This conquest is already over." But as the Zerif forces began their descent toward Earth's surface, something nagged at the back of Vex's mind. The human general's words had been those of surrender, certainly, but his tone had been something else entirely. "Sir," called out scanner operator Wix, "I'm detecting unusual activity across the planet's surface. It appears the humans are moving their military assets." "Moving them where?" Vex asked, though he wasn't particularly concerned. "Underground, sir. Deep underground. They are also evacuating population centers, but not in the pattern typically associated with surrender." Vex frowned, his first flicker of uncertainty. "Perhaps they are simply securing their people before we arrive. No matter. Continue landing operations." As the first Zerif dropships entered Earth's atmosphere, their crews laughed and joked about the shortest war in galactic history. After all, what could possibly go wrong when fighting an enemy armed with metal pellets and good intentions? None of them noticed the humans weren't running away. They were digging in. The first indication that something had gone terribly, wonderfully wrong came exactly 14 minutes after the initial Zerif landing forces touched down on Earth's surface. "Sir," reported Ground Operations Coordinator Dix, his voice carrying the first note of confusion that had been heard on the Doombringer's bridge since the invasion began. "We are experiencing unexpected difficulties with the pacification operations." Commander Vex Kral, who had been examining a holographic display of Earth's mineral wealth with the enthusiasm of a collector admiring new acquisitions, paused mid-gesture. "Difficulties? What kind of difficulties could there possibly be? Did they upgrade their metal-throwing technology in the last 14 minutes? "No, sir, but, well, they are not where our tactical projections said they would be." "Explain." Dix's mandibles clicked nervously, a sound that had never before been heard in a Zerif military briefing. "According to all standard conquest protocols, the human population should have gathered in centralized locations to await processing. Instead, they have scattered into terrain that our assault vehicles can't easily navigate." Vex's eyes narrowed. "Define can't easily navigate." "Underground tunnel system, sir. Elaborate ones. They appear to have been preparing these positions for some time. Our ground forces are reporting that every major city has been completely evacuated, but not abandoned." "Not abandoned?" Vex repeated, his voice taking on the tone of someone trying to solve a puzzle that kept changing its own rules. "The humans left presents, sir." The tactical display shifted to show feeds from ground forces, and what Vex saw made his confidence stumble for the first time in his military career. Where thriving human cities should have been, there were empty streets lined with what appeared to be metal containers. Lots of metal containers, all of them beeping. "Those are explosive devices," tactical analyst Kykes announced, his voice carrying the kind of scientific fascination usually reserved for discovering new forms of insect life. "Remarkably sophisticated ones, actually. They have managed to weaponize their own infrastructure." "They booby-trapped their entire civilization?" Vex asked, incredulous. "Apparently so, sir. But that's not the interesting part." Vex was beginning to develop a profound dislike for the phrase "interesting part." Continue. "The interesting part is how they are coordinating their resistance. Watch this." The display showed a feed from a Zerif patrol unit moving through what had once been a human settlement called Detroit. The streets were eerily quiet, abandoned vehicles sitting exactly where their owners had left them, creating a maze that forced the alien forces into predictable paths. Then the humans struck. But these weren't the clumsy projectile attacks from space. These were precise, coordinated strikes from multiple directions using weapons that actually hurt. "Sir, Patrol Unit 7 is reporting casualties," Dix announced, his voice now carrying a note that no Zar'keth commander had heard in centuries, genuine concern. "Casualties?" Vex repeated. "How is that possible?" "The humans have modified their kinetic weapons, sir. They are using our own shield frequency data against us." On the screen, Vex watched as human figures moved through the urban terrain with a fluidity that seemed impossible for such a primitive species. They appeared from buildings, fired weapons that somehow bypassed Zar'keth shields, and then vanished before return fire could be coordinated. "How did they obtain our shield frequency data?" Vex demanded. We broadcast it during our initial demonstration, sir. Standard intimidation protocol." Vex stared at the screen where a human had just taken down a Zar'keth soldier with a weapon that looked like it had been assembled in someone's garage. "They reverse-engineered our shield technology in 14 minutes? "Apparently, sir. But that's still not the most concerning part. There's more? Sir, Intelligence Division has been monitoring human communications. We have identified several key resistance leaders, and their behavior patterns are unusual." The display shifted to show surveillance footage of humans in what appeared to be underground command centers. One figure caught Vex's attention immediately, a female human with graying hair who moved with the kind of authority that transcended species. "Identify that one," Vex commanded. "Dr. Elena Vasquez, former director of Earth's Global Defense Initiative. Age 53, specialty in adaptive warfare systems. Sir, she's been coordinating resistance cells across multiple continents simultaneously, and her strategic decisions make no logical sense." "Elaborate." "Wham!" "She's sacrificing advantageous positions to save isolated human units. She's refusing to concentrate forces for maximum effectiveness. And sir, she's been deliberately exposing command positions to draw our fire away from civilian shelters." Vex watched as the human female directed operations with a calm efficiency that was both impressive and utterly baffling. "She's prioritizing individual lives over strategic objectives. Consistently, sir. And it gets worse. We have identified another key figure, Captain Jake Morrison, leading ground operations in the North American sector." The screen showed a young human male who appeared to be coordinating attacks while simultaneously evacuating wounded soldiers in the middle of a firefight. This Morrison individual just abandoned a perfect ambush position to retrieve a wounded comrade, Intelligence Officer Zix reported. "The tactical advantage was completely lost." That's insane," Vex muttered. "Yes, sir, but effective. Sir, our casualties are mounting not because their weapons are superior, but because their behavior is completely unpredictable. They fight like individuals instead of units, they prioritize survival over victory. And they seem to operate under the assumption that every single life matters more than tactical success." "That's not how warfare works," Vex protested. "No, sir, it's not. But somehow it's working." The bridge fell silent as everyone absorbed this impossible information. The Zar'keth Empire had conquered 47 star systems using logical, predictable military doctrine. They understood how wars were fought, with overwhelming force, strategic positioning, and calculated acceptable losses. Humans, apparently, had never read the manual. "Sir," Dix added quietly, "there's one more thing. The humans have been broadcasting on all frequencies. Surrender terms? No, sir. They are singing." "Singing?" "Yes, sir. Something called 'We Will Rock You.' Our translators can't determine its strategic significance, but it appears to be some sort of psychological warfare technique." As if on cue, the sound of human voices echoed across the bridge speakers, a rhythmic chanting that seemed to carry far more confidence than any species facing extinction had a right to possess. For the first time in his career, Commander Vex Krall realized he might be dealing with something he didn't understand. 3 weeks into what was supposed to be the shortest conquest in galactic history, Commander Vex Kral found himself staring at casualty reports that made absolutely no sense. "Explain to me again," he said slowly, his voice carrying the kind of patience typically reserved for speaking to particularly dim children, "how a species that still uses chemical explosives managed to destroy 17 of our hover tanks?" Sub-Commander Nix shifted uncomfortably, a gesture that would have been impossible to imagine just a month ago. "Sir, they didn't destroy them with explosives. They used farm equipment." "Farm equipment?" "Yes, sir. Specifically vehicles designed for agricultural purposes. They strapped their explosive devices to these tractors and drove them directly into our formations." Vex stared at her for a long moment. "They used farm tractors as guided missiles?" "Not guided, sir. Piloted. The humans were still driving them." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that civilizations use to mark the exact moment when everything they thought they knew turned out to be completely wrong. "You are telling me," Vex said carefully, "that these humans deliberately crashed farm vehicles into our military hardware, knowing they would die in the process?" "Multiple times, sir. We have recorded at least 43 instances of what our analysts are calling havicular sacrifice attacks. Cars, trucks, farm equipment, construction machinery, if it has wheels and an engine, they have apparently weaponized it." Tactical Officer Rex cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, that's not even the most confusing part." Rex's mandibles began twitching, a sure sign that his famous patience was approaching its expiration date. But continue. "The humans have developed what can only be described as adaptive improvisation. They are creating new weapons faster than we can catalog them. Yesterday, a patrol unit was attacked by humans using modified kitchen appliances." "Kitchen appliances?" "Pressure cookers, sir. Filled with metal fragments and basic explosive compounds. One human female eliminated, an entire squad using what our translators identify as a rice cooker." The bridge crew exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their collective mental state. They had trained for decades to fight other advanced civilizations with predictable military technologies. Nobody had prepared them for enemies who turned cooking utensils into weapons of war. "Sir," added Intelligence Officer Zix, pulling up a holographic display, "we have been analyzing human communication patterns, and their tactical coordination doesn't follow any known military doctrine." "Show me." "Way." The display revealed a three-dimensional map of human resistance activities across North America. Instead of the organized military structure any rational species would employ, it looked like chaos. Complete, beautiful chaos. "This is Captain Morrison's sector," Zix explained, highlighting a cluster of activity points. "According to standard military theory, he should be concentrating his forces for maximum impact. Instead, he's divided them into small units that operate independently." "That's tactically insane," Vex observed. "Small units can't achieve strategic objectives." "No, sir, but they can accomplish something we didn't anticipate. They can survive. Each unit operates without central command, adapts to local conditions, and when one is destroyed, the others simply continue fighting." Vex studied the display with growing unease. "It's like fighting smoke." "Exactly, sir. But it gets worse. Watch this." The display zoomed in on a specific engagement where human forces had been completely surrounded by superior Zar'keth units. By all logical standards, the humans should have surrendered or been eliminated within minutes. Instead, they had done something impossible. "They tunneled out?" Vex asked, watching the tactical replay. "No, sir, they tunneled in, towards our positions. When we surrounded them, they attacked in every direction simultaneously, including straight down and straight up. That's suicide." "Yes, sir, but effective suicide. They eliminated 2 of our armored units before they were neutralized." Vex was beginning to understand why his ground commanders had started requesting what they euphemistically called stress relief rotations back to the fleet. "Sir," Nix interjected, consulting her data pad, "we are receiving reports from the European theater that might explain some of this behavior." "Go ahead." Humans appear to possess an unusual psychological trait. When faced with certain defeat, Instead of surrendering or retreating, they become more dangerous. More dangerous how? They stop following their own tactical protocols, sir. A human unit under extreme pressure will attempt maneuvers that no rational military force would consider. They will attack superior forces, hold impossible positions, and continue fighting even when victory is mathematically impossible. Scanner operator Wicks looked up from his console with an expression of profound bewilderment. Sir, I have been monitoring human communications during combat situations, and their behavior makes no logical sense. Explain. During the engagement at what they call Chicago, we monitored radio transmissions from a surrounded human unit. They were outnumbered 50-1, had exhausted most of their ammunition, and had no possibility of reinforcement. And? They were laughing, sir, and telling jokes, while under heavy fire. Vex felt something that his species had no word for, mainly because they had never experienced it before. It was a creeping realization that the universe might not work the way he thought it did. Sir, added Communications Officer TX, we intercepted a transmission from the human female, Dr. Vasquez. She was addressing her remaining forces after we eliminated 60% of their operational capacity. What did she say? Quote, well, folks, the good news is we have got them exactly where we want them. The bad news is where we want them is everywhere at once, but hey, nobody said this job would be easy. End quote. She was optimistic about being nearly eliminated. Apparently, sir, the transmission was followed by what our analysts believe was collective human laughter. X sank back into his command throne, feeling the weight of a cosmic joke that seemed to be on him rather than these supposedly primitive humans. Sir, Dix announced from his station, incoming priority transmission from Ground Commander Vorth. Put him through. The holographic image of Ground Commander Vorth materialized, and Vex was startled to see that the veteran warrior looked tired. Deeply, profoundly tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. Commander Kral, Vorth began, his voice carrying undertones of something that might have been desperation. I respectfully request immediate tactical reassessment of this operation. Explain. Sir, we are not fighting a military force. We are fighting, I don't know what we are fighting. These humans don't respond to superior firepower. They don't retreat from hopeless positions. And they seem to consider impossible odds a personal challenge rather than a reason for surrender. Your recommendation? Vorth paused for a moment that stretched far too long. Sir, I have been fighting wars for 2 centuries. I have conquered civilizations that possessed technology we couldn't understand. But these humans, they fight like the universe owes them a victory, and they are willing to collect on that debt one impossible battle at a time. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. For the first time since the invasion began, Commander Vex Kral wondered if they might have bitten off more than they could chew. The Battle of Denver, as human historians would later call it, was supposed to be the definitive demonstration of Ziraph's superiority. On paper, it looked like a masterpiece of military planning. 10,000 Ziraph troops, supported by aerial units and heavy armor, converging on a human stronghold that intelligence estimated contained fewer than 800 defenders. Commander Vex Kral watched the opening moves from the tactical display aboard the Doombringer, confident that this would finally break the human spirit. After all, how could any rational species continue fighting when faced with such overwhelming odds? He was about to learn that rationality was apparently optional for humans. Ground forces are in position, reported Ground Operations Coordinator Dix, though his voice lacked the enthusiasm it had carried during the early days of the invasion. Complete encirclement achieved. Human forces have nowhere to retreat. Excellent, Vex replied, settling back to enjoy what should have been the final act of this unnecessarily prolonged conquest. Begin the assault. The first indication that something was wrong came exactly 7 minutes into the attack. Sir, called out Tactical Officer Rix, his voice carrying a note of confusion that was becoming disturbingly familiar. The humans aren't retreating to defensive positions. What are they doing? They are advancing, sir. Directly toward our main force. Vex leaned forward, studying the tactical display with growing bewilderment. The human defenders, vastly outnumbered and completely surrounded, had done something that violated every principle of military logic. They had split their already inadequate forces and launched simultaneous attacks in 6 different directions. "That's suicide," Vex muttered. "Yes, sir, but very effective suicide," Rix replied. "They have somehow turned their tactical weakness into, I'm not sure what to call it, sir." On the screen, Vex watched as small groups of humans, armed with their improvised weapons and impossible determination, struck Zar'keth positions with the kind of ferocity typically associated with cornered predators. Except these weren't cornered predators. These were creatures who had voluntarily cornered themselves and then decided to treat the corner as a launching platform. "Sir," interrupted Intelligence Officer Zix, "we are monitoring human communications from the battle zone. I think you should hear this." The bridge speakers crackled to life with the voice of Captain Jake Morrison, the human who had been coordinating resistance in the North American sector. His words, transmitted in the midst of overwhelming enemy fire, would haunt Zar'keth military analysts for generations. "All right, people, they have got us surrounded. Poor bastards. Charlie Team, take the northern approach and make some noise. Delta Team, hit them from the south and make it hurt. Echo Team, you are with me. We are going straight up the middle because apparently that's the kind of day we are having." The transmission was punctuated by what sounded like explosions and weapons fire, but Morrison's voice carried a tone that Vex's translation systems struggled to process. It wasn't desperation or fear. It was anticipation? "Sir," Zix continued, "that transmission was followed by increased human combat effectiveness. Our casualty rates jumped 40% immediately after those words were spoken. How is that possible?" "We believe the humans were inspired, sir, encouraged by being told they were outnumbered." Vex stared at the tactical display where red markers indicating Zar'keth casualties were appearing with alarming frequency. "They are inspired by hopeless odds?" "Apparently, sir. But that's not the most concerning development." "Continue." "Dr. Elena Vasquez has been broadcasting continuously throughout the engagement. Her messages appear to be coordinating not just tactical movements, but something our psychologists are calling morale maintenance." Another transmission filled the bridge, this one carrying the voice of the human female who had been causing Zar'keth strategic planners so many sleepless cycles. "Listen up, you magnificent, stubborn fools, Doctor," Vasquez announced over what sounded like the end of the world. "I know the math doesn't look good. 10,000 of them, 800 of us. But here's the thing about math. It's only as good as the assumptions you plug into it. And their biggest assumption is that we are going to act like rational beings." Laughter. Actual human laughter echoed across the battlefield communication channels. "So let's disappoint them," she continued. "Let's show these alien visitors what happens when Earth's children decide that impossible is just another word for challenge accepted." The effect on human combat performance was immediate and terrifying. Zar'keth units began reporting that human forces were no longer responding to tactical pressure. Instead of retreating when overwhelmed, they were doubling down. Instead of conserving resources when ammunition ran low, they were becoming more creative. "Sir," reported scanner operator Wix, his voice tight with something that might have been panic, "Ground Unit 12 is requesting immediate evacuation." "Evacuation," Vex repeated. "From what?" "From humans, sir. The unit commander reports that his forces are being systematically eliminated by humans using improvised weapons." "What kind of improvised weapons?" "Kitchen knives attached to broomsticks, sir. And something called a nail gun that they have modified to fire construction materials." The tactical display updated in real time, showing Zar'keth positions falling not to advanced military technology, but to humans who had apparently weaponized their entire civilization. Tool sheds became armories. Garden centers became explosive manufacturing facilities. Even children's toys were being repurposed into instruments of war. "Sir," Dix announced, his voice cracking slightly. Ground Commander Vorth is reporting complete tactical breakdown in sectors 7 through 12. Define complete tactical breakdown. Human forces have penetrated Zar'keth lines using, sir, they dug tunnels. While under fire, they have been excavating attack routes in real time, coordinating with surface forces to create, I believe the term is three-dimensional warfare. Vex watched in horrified fascination as human forces appeared behind, above, and below Zar'keth positions with the kind of tactical creativity that suggested they were making up military doctrine as they went along. Sir, Communications Officer T-Wex called out, "We are receiving surrender requests." "From the humans?" "No, sir. From our ground forces." The bridge fell silent. In 2,000 years of Zar'keth military history, no unit had ever requested permission to retreat from a numerically inferior enemy. "Patch me through to Ground Commander Vorth," Vex commanded. The holographic image that materialized showed a Zar'keth military officer who looked like he had seen the face of cosmic horror and found it wearing a friendly smile. "Commander Krau," Vorth began, his voice carrying the hollow tone of someone whose worldview had been systematically demolished, "respectfully request immediate orbital support." "Denied. You have overwhelming numerical superiority." "Sir, with respect, numerical superiority assumes the enemy follows conventional military behavior. These humans, they don't fight to win, sir. They fight like winning was never the point." "Explain." "Sir, I watched a human unit hold a position for 6 hours against impossible odds. When they finally ran out of ammunition, they didn't surrender. They started throwing rocks. Actual rocks, sir. And somehow it worked." The transmission flickered as explosions echoed in the background. "Sir," Vorth continued, "these humans have redefined the concept of acceptable losses. They will sacrifice everything for tactical advantages that shouldn't matter. They will die for objectives that serve no strategic purpose. And, sir, they are winning because of it." "That's impossible." "Yes, sir, but they are doing it anyway. Request permission to withdraw and reassess." For the first time in Zar'keth military history, a ground commander was asking permission to retreat from a primitive species armed with kitchen utensils and bad attitudes. Vex stared at the tactical display where his overwhelming force was being systematically dismantled by creatures who apparently viewed impossible odds as a personal insult. "Permission granted," he said quietly. As Zar'keth forces began their first retreat of the war, Commander Vex Krall realized that they might be dealing with something far more dangerous than superior technology. They were dealing with a species that simply refused to lose. The revelation came to Commander Vex Krall during what his psychological evaluation team would later classify as a tactical nervous breakdown. No such terminology had never before appeared in Zar'keth military records. He was staring at the latest intelligence reports, documents that read less like military assessments and more like studies in applied impossibility, when the truth hit him with the force of a colliding star system. "It was never about the weapons," he whispered, his voice carrying the hollow tone of someone whose entire understanding of reality had just been systematically demolished. "Sir?" Sub-Commander Nix asked, though her own voice carried the brittle quality of someone hanging onto sanity by increasingly thin threads. "The weapons," Vex repeated, louder now, his mandibles clicking in what could charitably be called hysteria. "We have been analyzing their projectile velocities, studying their explosive yields, cataloging their improvised modifications. But that was never the point." Around the bridge, his command staff exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their collective mental state. 3 months into the conquest that should have taken 3 hours, everyone aboard the Doombringer looked like they had been personally insulted by the universe itself. "Sir," Intelligence Officer Zix ventured carefully, "our latest psychological analysis of human combat behavior has yielded some interesting results." "Define interesting," Vex said, though he was beginning to suspect that interesting had become synonymous with reasons to question the fundamental nature of existence. "We have been monitoring human forces under extreme duress, sir. Complete isolation, overwhelming odds, zero probability of survival or victory. According to every psychological model we possess, they should experience what we call rational surrender response. And They don't, sir. Instead, they experience something our analysts have termed combative optimism. The worse their situation becomes, the more enthusiastic they become about fighting. Vex studied the data streaming across his tactical displays, information that painted a picture of human behavior so far outside normal parameters that it might as well have been written in a language from another dimension. "Show me the latest engagement reports," he commanded. The holographic display materialized, showing footage from the ongoing siege of what humans called New York. Zera forces had surrounded the city for weeks, systematically eliminating escape routes and supply lines. By any rational measure, the human defenders should have surrendered days ago. Instead, they had somehow made the situation worse for the attackers. "Explain to me," Vex said slowly, "how humans trapped in an urban environment with limited resources managed to increase their combat effectiveness." "They stopped trying to win conventionally, sir," Tactical Officer Rix reported, his voice carrying the kind of professional detachment that comes from witnessing too many impossible things. "Instead, they redefined victory conditions." Meaning? Meaning? For humans, sir, victory appears to be measured not by territorial control or strategic objectives, but by persistence. They have turned simple survival into a form of warfare. The display showed human forces operating from sewers, subway tunnels, rooftops, and basement bunkers. They weren't fighting to retake territory or eliminate enemy forces. They were fighting to continue fighting, treating each day of resistance as a tactical victory in itself. "Sir," added scanner operator Wix, "we have identified the psychological mechanism they are using. Humans appear capable of something we are calling selective reality perception." "Explain." "When faced with impossible odds, they simply refuse to acknowledge that the odds are impossible." Dr. Elena Vasquez broadcast this message yesterday after we eliminated 70% of her available forces. The bridge speakers crackled with the now familiar voice of the human female who had become the embodiment of everything wrong with this conquest. Day 93 of what our alien visitors probably thought would be a weekend vacation, Dr. Vasquez announced, her tone carrying the kind of cheerful confidence typically reserved for discussing pleasant weather. "Good news, we are still here. Bad news, so are they. But here's the thing about bad news, it's only bad if you let it bother you." The transmission was interrupted by what sounded like sustained weapons fire and explosions. "Echo Team, nice work with that improvised rocket launcher." "Delta Team, I love what you have done with those modified fire extinguishers. Command wants everyone to know that, statistically speaking, we should have lost this war 3 months ago. So technically, everything we do from this point forward is just showing off." More laughter. Always more laughter. "Keep it up, people. We are not just fighting for Earth anymore. We are fighting for the right to be unreasonably stubborn in the face of overwhelming evidence that we should quit." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in the kind of silence typically associated with funerals or existential crises. "Sir," Nix said quietly, "our psychological warfare division has attempted to break human morale using standard demoralization techniques. Results: complete failure, sir. When we destroyed their supply depots, they started growing food in bomb craters. When we eliminated their communication networks, they developed a message system using children's toys. When we targeted their leadership, more leaders simply appeared." Vex felt something that his species had no word for, primarily because they had never encountered anything stupid enough to experience it, the creeping realization that they were losing a war to an enemy that refused to acknowledge they were supposed to lose. "Sir," Communications Officer TX announced, "incoming transmission from the Zar'keth High Command." The holographic image of Supreme Commander Korth materialized, and Vex was shocked to see that even the highest levels of Zar'keth leadership looked tired. "Commander Krall," Korth began, his voice carrying undertones of barely controlled panic, "status report on the Earth conquest. Sir, we have achieved complete tactical superiority over human forces in all major engagements. And yet the humans continue fighting." "Yes, sir." "Yes, sir." "For 3 months." "Yes, sir." "Against overwhelming odds." "Yes, sir." "Using improvised weapons and gardening equipment." That is an accurate assessment, sir. Supreme Commander Quarth was silent for a long moment, his expression suggesting someone trying to solve the equation where all the numbers had been replaced with abstract concepts like hope and stubbornness. Commander Krall, he said finally, I want you to understand something. In 2,000 years of galactic conquest, the Zar'keth Empire has never encountered a species that confused losing with winning to this degree. Sir, they are not winning. Then why? Quarth asked, his voice rising to something approaching a shout. Are we having this conversation? Why haven't 8 billion primitives armed with kitchen utensils surrendered to the most advanced military force in the galaxy? Vex opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again as he realized he had no rational response to offer. Sir, he said finally, I believe we may have encountered a fundamental flaw in our strategic planning. Which is? We assumed they would want to survive more than they wanted to fight. It appears we were wrong. Supreme Commander Quarth's image flickered as if the transmission itself was having trouble processing this information. Fix it, he commanded. Whatever it takes. And this. As the transmission ended, Commander Vex Krall stared at his tactical displays and realized that for the first time in his military career, he had absolutely no idea how to proceed. How do you defeat an enemy whose definition of victory is simply refusing to lose? The final battle began at dawn on what Commander Vex Krall had designated as Victory Day. 6 months after the invasion that should have ended in 6 hours, he had assembled the largest military force in Zar'keth history for one last, overwhelming assault on the remaining human strongholds. Sir, reported Sub-Commander Nix, though her voice now carried the mechanical quality of someone who had witnessed too many impossible things, all forces are in position. 500,000 troops, complete orbital support, and enough firepower to sterilize a continent. Vex nodded from his command throne, trying to project confidence he no longer felt. Around him, the bridge crew moved with the careful precision of beings who had learned that the universe might explode at any moment for reasons that defied all logic. Human resistance levels? He asked, though he dreaded the answer. Approximately 50,000 defenders scattered across 12 underground complexes, Intelligence Officer Zix replied. Sir, they should be completely overwhelmed within hours. Should be, Vex repeated, the phrase carrying the bitter taste of 6 months' worth of shattered expectations. Begin the assault. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries, though most scholars would conclude that the after-action reports had been written by beings suffering from collective hallucinations. The first sign that reality had once again decided to ignore military doctrine came exactly 12 minutes into the assault. Sir, Tactical Officer Rix announced, his voice carrying the kind of calm desperation that comes from watching the impossible become routine. Human forces are advancing. Advancing where? Toward us, sir. All of them. From all directions. They have abandoned their defensive positions and are attacking our entire perimeter simultaneously. Vex stared at the tactical display, watching as 50,000 humans launched a coordinated assault against 500,000 Zar'keth troops. It was like watching insects attack a wildfire, spectacular, suicidal, and somehow deeply disturbing. That's not a tactical maneuver, he muttered. That's mass suicide. Yes, sir, but very organized mass suicide, Rix replied. They are coordinating these attacks using what appears to be, sir, they are using children's walkie-talkies. On the battlefield displays, Vex watched as human forces moved with impossible coordination, despite using communication technology that belonged in a museum. Small units appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking Zar'keth positions with weapons that included everything from modified farm equipment to what appeared to be explosive musical instruments. Sir, Scanner Operator Wix called out, I'm detecting massive underground movement. The humans have been, sir, they have been digging. Digging what? Everything, sir. Tunnels, bunkers, entire underground cities connected by passages that extend for hundreds of kilometers. Our ground forces aren't fighting on a battlefield. They are fighting inside a human-built maze. The tactical display updated to show the true scope of human preparations, and Vex felt his remaining sanity pack its bags and head for the exit. The humans had spent 6 months turning the entire continental landmass into a three-dimensional battlefield where every surface, every tunnel, and every building could become a weapon. Sir, Communications Officer TUX announced incoming transmission from Dr. Elena Vasquez. The human female's voice filled the bridge one last time, and Vex was disturbed to realize she sounded happy. "Good morning, Commander Kral," she said, somehow managing to sound like she was greeting an old friend rather than addressing the leader of an invasion force. "I hope you are enjoying the show. We have put together a little demonstration of what we like to call human stubbornness taken to its logical conclusion." Explosions echoed across the communication channel, but her voice remained steady. "See, you made a fundamental error in your calculations. You assumed we were fighting to win. But that was never the point. We are fighting because fighting is what we do. It's who we are." "Sir," Dix interrupted, "we are receiving surrender requests from ground units across all sectors." "From humans?" "No, sir. From us." On the tactical display, Zera forces were in full retreat from an enemy that should have been eliminated hours ago. Humans armed with improvised weapons and impossible determination were systematically dismantling the most advanced military force in galactic history. "How?" Vex whispered. Dr. Vasquez's transmission continued as if she had heard his question. "You want to know our secret weapon? It's not our technology. It's not our tactics. It's the simple fact that we decided you can't have our planet, and we are too stubborn to change our minds." Ground units across the battlefield were reporting the same impossible phenomenon. Humans who continued fighting even when victory was mathematically impossible, and who treated overwhelming odds as a personal challenge, and who somehow turned every defeat into a reason to fight harder. "Sir." Ground Commander Vorth's voice crackled over the communication system, requesting immediate evacuation of all ground forces. "Status report," Vex demanded. "Sir, we are not fighting an army. We are fighting an idea. The idea that some things are worth dying for, and that surrender is just another word for giving up. And sir, that idea is winning." The tactical display showed Zera forces in full retreat, chased by humans who had somehow turned their technological disadvantage into a tactical advantage, and their numerical inferiority into a strategic strength, and their hopeless situation into an unstoppable force. "Sir," Nix said quietly, "perhaps we should consider withdrawing from this system." Vex stared at the display, showing his defeated forces fleeing from creatures armed with determination and garden tools. For the first time in his military career, he understood what it meant to be truly, completely outmatched. "Set course for home," he commanded, his voice carrying the hollow tone of someone whose entire worldview had been systematically demolished. "And prepare a report for High Command." "What should the report say, sir?" Vex was quiet for a long moment, watching as his invasion fleet prepared to retreat from a species that had never possessed a single weapon capable of threatening a Zeref starship. "Tell them," he said finally, "that we encountered something we weren't prepared for." "Which was?" "A species that believes impossible is just another word for give us 5 minutes." As the Zeref fleet departed Earth's solar system, Commander Vex Kral realized they had learned the most important lesson in galactic military history. Never fight an enemy that has nothing left to lose and too much pride to quit. Humans, it turned out, had both in abundance.